Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and today's topic is a very interesting one, a special one if you grew up watching anything on the Westerns or if you actually live in the area where the Wild West took place. You grew up on all this. And one of them is about a young Irish Catholic, and he needs a fair trial, so we're going to give it to him. We're going to learn about Billy the Kid, the Lincoln County, New Mexico War, and everything behind it politically. And Brother Alexis will be asking the questions and filling in about how corrupt Irish politicians are.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV, and this is a very interesting part of American history, really mostly before the time even my relatives emigrated to the States, but I've always been fascinated by the Wild West, and I'm amazed to know that Billy the Kid was a Roman Catholic, so this is going to be a great show. Billy the Kid, was he an outlaw? That's maybe you could put as our subtitle of this program. Who was he really like? And we'll talk about his life and his guns, his deeds or misdeeds. So who was Billy the Kid? What was his real name and where was he born?
His real name was Henry McCarty, was born to Irish Catholic ancestry. Catherine Denine, or McCarty, in New York City. While his birth year has been confirmed in 1859, the exact date of his birth, they say, has been disputed, but from St. Peter's Church in Manhattan, still has the actual baptism certificate, showing his baptism was on September 28, 1859. Back in the day, weren't Catholic newborns baptized right away. Brother?
Okay, so what was all the tragedy going on in his family and how did he end up going west?
Yeah. Following the death of his father, Patrick, Catherine McCarty and her sons moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, where she met William Henry Harrison Antrim. Then the McCarty family moved with Antrim to Wichita, Kansas in 1870. After moving again a few years later, Catherine married Antrim on March 1st, 1873, at the First Presbyterian Church in Santa Fe, New Mexico territory. McCarty and his brother Joseph were witnesses to the ceremony. Shortly afterwards, the family moved from Santa Fe to Silver City, New Mexico, and Joseph McCarty began using the name Joseph Antrim. Catherine McCarty died of tuberculosis on September 16, 1874.
So here is like, it was a hard thing in the 19th century. If you're the husband of the family died, who would support you? And but I guess it certainly can't prove that she lived with this man for 2 years before marrying him and that she married him outside the Catholic Church, which was forbidden back then to Catholics. And then her own tragic death of tuberculosis within a year of the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So the families moved several times. The boys now are in Silver City. If you're not familiar with geography of New Mexico, Silver City is right near the Mexican border. It's in the southwest corner of the state. It has a high crime rate even today, but it's one of the towns with a very colored history in the Wild West. And so the mother's dead, the father's dead, the stepfather, obviously, these are not his kids. So, you know, you can imagine what he would do with them. And, but was he ever in Kansas? Okay, so he's what, 12 or 14 now? He's in Silver City. Did he get to Kansas? Or if so, how did he get there?
Right when his dad passed away, She took the sons, moved to Indianapolis, met Antrim. Then they moved the family with Antrim to Wichita, Kansas in 1870, and there she signed the city records to prove that they were all there in 1870. And just a few years later, they started and moved into the New Mexico territory.
Okay, so I guess it was a census of 1870 she probably signed, because they
Yeah.
were doing censuses every 10 years, according to the Constitution. So his mom dies of tuberculosis. He's already lost his father. Can you imagine the tragedy? How old was he when his ma died? He was around like 14 or?
Yeah.
And with any evidence he went to school or learned to read and write?
He knew how to read, write, and speak English, and pretty fluent in Spanish.
Okay. So how is it that he goes outside the law, becomes what we call in English an outlaw, which is a word that means someone who doesn't live according to the rule of law, which is kind of a strong term, but actually in the Wild West, an outlaw is more kind of almost like a mythical classification of not necessarily a criminal, but someone who is an opportunist, opportunist. And though in this case, did he become an outlaw, and did he ever really merit that name?
Well, after losing his mom and dad, he moved out, and this lady, Sarah Brown, the owner of a boarding house, gave him a room and board in exchange for work. On September 16th, 1875, I'm guessing he wasn't getting much food, so he was caught stealing food. Then 10 days later, McCarty and another boy, George Schaefer, robbed a Chinese laundry, stealing clothing and 2 pistols. McCarty was charged with theft and jailed. He escaped 2 days later and became a fugitive, as reported in the Silver City Herald the next day. The first story published about him. McCarty located his stepfather and stayed with him until Antrim threw him out. McCarty stole clothing and guns from him, and the last time the two saw each other.
You have to be pretty darn poor to steal clothing, okay? So obviously this kid didn't have a penny to his name. And well, while theft of itself is wrong, in cases of extreme necessity, it's not immorally wrong to take what is necessary for life, okay? So if he was really starving and had nothing else to live on, it's not really theft, and his father-in-law should have given him clothing. And at the age of 16 in the West, he should have given him a gun. That's necessary for self-protection, not to mention a horse and some food. But we could see how he may not have gotten along with Billy the Kid, as he comes to be known, because it wasn't his natural son. So he gets thrown out by his father-in-law, Mr. Antrim. And what does he do then? Does he go directly to Lincoln County? And where is Lincoln County, New Mexico?
Well, after he got kicked out, McCarty traveled to southern Arizona Territory, where he worked as a ranch hand and gambled his wages in nearby gaming houses. In 1876, he was hired as a ranch hand by a well-known rancher, Henry Hooker. During this time, McCarty became acquainted with John R. Mackey, a Scottish-born criminal and former U.S. cavalry private, who, following his discharge, remained near the U.S. Army post at Camp Grant. 2 men began stealing horses from local soldiers. McCarty became known as Kid Antrim because of his youth and slight build, clean-shaven appearance, and personality. Then, August 17, 1877, McCarty was at a saloon in the village of Bonita when he got into an argument with Francis P. Windy Cahill, a blacksmith who reportedly had bullied McCarty on one more than an occasion called him a pimp. McCarty in turn called Cahill a SOB, not saying the word here, folks. Whereupon Cahill threw McCarty to the floor, and the two struggled for McCarty's revolver. McCarty shot and mortally wounded Cahill. A witness said Billy had no choice. He had to use his equalizer, meaning his Colt pistol. Cahill died the following day. McCarty fled, but returned a few days later and was apprehended by Miles Wood, local justice of the peace. McCarty was detained, held in the Camp Grant guardhouse, but escaped before the law enforcement could arrive. McCarty stole a horse and fled Arizona territory from New Mexico territory. But Apaches took the horse from him, leaving him to walk many miles into the nearest settlement. At Fort Stanton in Pecos Valley, McCarty, starving and near death, went to the home of a friend, Seven Rivers Warriors gang member, John Jones, whose mother, Barbara, nursed him back to health. After regaining his health, McCarty went to Apache Tejo, a former army post, where he joined a band of rustlers who raided herds owned by the cattle magnate John Chisholm in Lincoln County. And after McCarty was spotted in Silver City, his involvement with the gang was mentioned in the local newspapers. At some point in 1877, McCarty began to refer to himself with the name William H. Bonney.
Now, is Lincoln County the county of Silver City? Do you know? Just so we can place this geographically. I know Silver City is built on this mountain range that sprouts out of the desert there in southwest New Mexico, and at high elevations has good grazing ground even in the summertime.
It has the town of Carrizozo, serves as the county seat, and is in the Tularosa Basin, northwest of Ruidoso. Ruidoso boasts several small suburbs and neighbor communities, including Ruidoso Downs, Hollywood, Miscaro, and Alto. So it's not part of Silver City.
Not part of Silver City. So rustling horses is a crime. In the West, it was usually punished by death. So it's a very serious crime back then, and stealing government property horses. But we can't excuse that. Living that way is just not honest. The problem with outlaws in the Wild West was they had no gainful employment, and often they did steal because they had to eat and they had to survive. But it doesn't justify remaining in that state all the time and not seeking honest work. But once they committed a crime for which they would get the death penalty, it was either suffer the penalty or remain in a constant state of being outlaw on the run.
Yeah.
So Billy becomes an outlaw. What is this? Who is John Tunstall, and how does he get involved in John Tunstall?
Yeah. After returning to New Mexico, Bonney worked as a cowboy for an English businessman and rancher, John Henry Tunstall. Tunstall was born in London, England, became a rancher and merchant in Lincoln County, New Mexico, where he competed with Irish Catholic merchants, lawmen, and politicians who ran the town of Lincoln in the county. Tunstall, who hoped to unseat the Irish and make a fortune as a county's new boss, was the first man killed in the Lincoln County War, an economic and political conflict that resulted in armed warfare between rival gangs of cowboys and ranchers, lawmen, and politicians who issued the orders.
Now, how was Tunstall involved in the life of Billy Kid, and did he try to reform him and make him into an honest man?
Yeah. He brought him and a few other members of the gang he was riding with to work with him on the ranch. he taught, I think this is where he mostly got his education from, because he taught him how to read actual good books, books from England, and he taught him how to read, taught him to read it by using books by Shakespeare. And he also taught him how to read by giving him a Bible, and he read it often.
Mhm.
And so he brought God back into his life.
Now, how was it that Tunstall ended up being killed, and what kind of reaction does Billy the Kid have to this like foster father's death?
Well, he was going to town to meet with John Chisholm and Alex McQueen, who the three of them decided, well, we need our own bank since we can't work with Murphy and can't allow Murphy to try to keep running the town. So the goods from that they were bringing in was going to be coming in soon. So he thought we'd go back to the store, which would also be the bank ran by Alex McQueen. And so he was on his way to town, and lawman, if you want to call him that, owned and paid for by Lawrence Murphy, the corrupt Irish politician, saw him coming to town. They knew what was going on because they had also their own set of cowboys, if you want to say, spying about, seeing when that wagon of supplies is going to get there. And so they come up to him and says, "Where are you going?" "I'm just going to go in town and get things ready for the shipment coming in." "No, you're not." "Like, yes, I am." Then all of a sudden, it gets into a heated argument. Like, okay, it's time to end this corruption, so I'm heading to Santa Fe to the governor. And that really set him off. And one of the so-called deputies shot him, then took out a gun out of his saddlebag, put it next to Tunstall's body, saying, "You put report that he was going for a gun." But he was never going for a gun because he never carried a gun. He was going for his tobacco pouch or his uh, pipe. He was shot dead.
Now, who is this Lawrence Murphy, and what was he trying to do in Lincoln County that caused this whole controversy to break out?
Let's see. Lawrence Gustav Murphy. He was an Irish Union Army veteran, Grand Army of the Republican Party member. He was also a racketeer. So he was born in County Wexford, Ireland, and as an adult moved to the United States. He enlisted in the United States Army from 1851 to 1855 and re-enlisted 1 year later in 1856. After he was discharged in 1861, he ventured to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and re-enlisted once again in the Union Army. He served for the duration of the Civil War but saw little, if any, combat. He mustered out at Fort Stanton in 1866 and quickly joined the Grand Army of the Republic, which united Union Army veterans as auxiliaries of the Republican Party in the reconstruction of America. He established relationships with other well-connected GAR members, went into business with German immigrant Emil Fritz. Due to Murphy's connections, the partners immediately began securing military contracts to supply beef, vegetables, and supplies to the Apache Reservation. They then hatched schemes to sell land they didn't own to unsuspecting farmers. He eventually moved to Lincoln County, New Mexico in 1859. 1869, he started the L.G. Murphy Company. By 1873, he had hired fellow Irish immigrant James Dolan, who by 1874 had become a business partner in the profitable mercantile and banking operation. The business saw success mainly due to there to be no competition. Murphy also became influential with law enforcement circles and had alliance with the Lincoln County Sheriff, William J. Brady.
So did he? Did his scheming arrive him at owning everything in town or in the county or in even the law?
Yeah.
So what did he do? Run the city as a racket? Everyone had to pay him inflated prices,
Yep.
and he could never get prosecuted for his crimes.
Nope.
Now, okay, so this is Lincoln County. Now, people may have heard of the Lincoln County War. Did the killing of Tunstall precipitate the outbreak of the Lincoln County War, and what was this war about?
It was about, well, yes, it started right after the 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 murder of John Tunstall. But here's a little background of it. Well, as I said, John Chisholm and Alexander McSween opened a rival business called the J.H. Tunstall and Company, which would have been the another big store, which also in the store was also a bank. Money funded by the great cattle rancher John Chisholm. Then once things came to a head with Tunstall's murder, and it was murder, the Billy Kid and everyone at the funeral was so upset, enraged, and knew who ordered it, but the man was untouchable. And you see in the movies Young Guns 1 and the movie with John Wayne called Chisholm, Billy Kid makes a promise over the grave of John Tunstall. Not to get revenge, but justice. That meant he had to pick up his guns once again and do what the law couldn't do. Because they wouldn't do because, well, they were paid for by Murphy.
So is Billy the Kid is the one who really starts the Lincoln County War in the sense of the counter response?
Yeah.
And what happens in this Lincoln County War? What are the events?
God. The event sparked the Lincoln County War, so known as it was a range war, but it also took place inside the city. So the guys, the Lakers set out to apprehend the sheriff's posse members who had murdered Tunstall after the regulators were deputized by the Lincoln County Justice of the Peace together with Constable Martinez. They attempted to serve legally issue warrants to Tunstall's murderers. Sheriff Brady arrested and jailed Martinez and his deputies in defiance of their deputized status. To gain release and search for Tunstall's murderers, they found Buck Morton, Dick Lloyd, and Frank Baker near Rio Pensacola. Morton surrendered after a 5-mile running gunfight on a condition that he and his fellow Deputy Sheriff Frank Baker, who had no part in the Tunstall murder, but was riding with Morton and Lloyd, would be returned alive to Lincoln. The regulators' captain, Dick Brewer, assured them they would be taken to Lincoln, but other regulators insisted on killing the prisoners. One regulator, William McCloskey, was a friend of Morton's, resisted such action. On the way back to Lincoln on March 9, 1878, the third day of the journey back, the regulators killed McCloskey, Morton, and Baker in the Captain's foothills along the Blackwater Creek. They claimed that Morton murdered McCloskey and tried to escape with Baker, forcing him to kill the two prisoners. As they thought it unlikely that Morton would have killed his only friend in the group, as the bodies of Morton and Baker each bore 11 bullet holes, one for each regulator. Utley believes the regulators murdered them and killed McCloskey for opposing them. Then Then he goes on where Sheriff Brady asked for assistance from Territorial Attorney General Thomas Benton Catron, who is also under the pay of Murphy. Then he goes to the Governor Samuel B. Axtell of New Mexico Territory, also under the payment of Murphy. And by the words of Murphy through the governor's mouth, the governor decreed that John Wilson, the justice of the peace, had appointed illegally by the Lincoln County Commissioners. Wilson had deputized regulators and issued warrants for Tunstall's murders. The actual decree meant that the regulators' actions formerly considered legal were now illegal. Axtell also was able to revoke Whitman's status as a deputy U.S. Marshal, making Sheriff Brady and his men the only law officers in Lincoln County.
So those ex post facto actions are completely illegal in law. You can't take away someone's authority after the fact. So it was really corrupt, that state. And I hear actually New Mexico is one of the most corrupt states even to this day. Now, what were the news? Well, did Billy the Kid and the regulators get captured, and did they get a fair hearing in court?
So he goes on April 1st, 1878. The regulators, French, McNabb, Middleton, Waite, Brown, McCarty, made ready in the crowd behind Tunstall's store before attacking Brady and his deputies on the main street of Lincoln. Brady died of at least a dozen gunshot wounds. Deputy George W. Hinman was also wounded fatally. McCarty and French broke cover and dashed to Brady's body, possibly get his arrest warrant for McSween or to recover McCarty's rifle, which Brady had kept from a prior arrest. A surviving deputy, Billy Matthews, wounded both men with one bullet that passed through both of them. French's wound was so severe that he had to be temporarily harbored by Sam Corbett in a crawl space in Corbett's house. Whitman was also in the crowd, but whether he participated was never ascertained. He claimed he was feeding Tunstall's dog. Then it goes from Battle of Blazers Mill. So they go to this mill, sawmill and trading post that supplied beef to the Mescalero Apaches. They came upon the rancher Buckshot Roberts, listed on their arrest warrant as one of Tunstall's murderers, in a ensuing shootout with regulators mortally wounded Roberts, but he killed Brewer and wounded Middleton, Surlock, Go, and McCarty. Then on to Fritz Ranch. No, they're still carrying out the warrants that they were issued when they were deputized. And so it's a gunfight at Fritz Ranch, which it was. And they get this guy. After Brewer's death, the regulators elected McNabb as their captain. On April 29, 1878, Sheriff Pepin was directing a posse that included Jess Evans' gang and 7 river warriors, also paid by Murphy. They engaged in a shootout with the regulators, McNabb, Saunders, and Frank Coe at the Fritz Ranch. McNabb died in the gunfire. Saunders was badly wounded, and Frank Coe was captured. The next day, the 7 Rivers members, Tom Green, Charles Marshall, James Patterson, and John Galvin, were killed in Lincoln. Although the regulators were blamed, this was never proven. Frank Coe escaped custody sometime after his capture, allegedly with the assistance of Deputy Sheriff Wallace Unger, who gave him a pistol. The day after McNabb's death, the regulators known as the Ironclad assumed defensive positions in the town of Lincoln, trading shots at Dolan's men. Allegedly, members of the U.S. Cavalry, Dutch Charlie Crewin and Dolan Main, was wounded by rifle fire by George Coe. By allegedly shooting at government troops, the regulators gained a new set of enemies. On May 15th, the regulators tracked down and captured the Jess Evans gang member, Manuel Segueva, who was believed to have shot McNabb. They shot him during the alleged escape. Around the time of Segueva's death, the regulators' Ironclad gained a new member, a young Texas cowboy named Tom O'Follered, who soon became McCarty's best friend. Then finally, the battle in Lincoln, New Mexico itself. A large confrontation between 2 forces occurred during the afternoon of July 15, 1878, when the regulators were surrounded and Lincoln in 2 different positions, the McSween house and the Ellis store. Opposing them were Dolan, Murphy, 7 Rivers Cowboys. In the Ellis store were Sherlock, Bowder, Middleton, Frank Coe, and several others, and about 20 Mexican regulators, commanded by Josefista Chavez, were also positioned around town. In McSween's house were Alex McSween and his wife Susan, Billy the Kid, Henry Brown, Jim French, Tom O'Follered, Jose Chavez, Y. Chavez, George Coe, and a dozen Mexican vaqueros. During the next 3 days, the men exchanged shots and shouts. Tom Coolins, one of the McSween house defenders, was killed by a stray bullet. The Dolan cowboy Charlie Crawford was shot at a distance of 500 yards by Doc Skurlock's father-in-law. Fernando Herrera. Around this time, Henry Brown, George Coe, and Joe Smith left the McSween house, went to the Tunstall store where they chased 2 Dolan men into an outhouse with rifle fire and forced them to dive into the bottom to escape. The impasse continued until the arrival of the U.S. Army troops commanded by Colonel Nathan Doodley. One of these troops pointed cannons at the Ellis store and other positions. Billy the Kid, Doc Skurlock, and his men fled from their positions, as did the Chavez Cowboys, leaving those remaining in the McSween house for their fate. On the afternoon of July 19, the Murphy-Dolan faction set the house on fire. As flames spread in the night began, Susan McSween, and other women, and 5 children were granted safe passage out the house, while the men inside continued to fight the fire. By 9 p.m., those left inside got set to flee out the back door over the burning house. Billy the Kid, Jim French, assessed the situation and figured out a way to escape by using pistol fire as cover and escaping. Jim French went out first, followed by Billy the Kid, Fullard, and Jose Chavez Y. Chavez. The Doldman saw them running and began shooting, killing Harvey Morse, McSween's law partner. Some troopers moved into the backyard to take those left into custody. When a close quarter gunfight erupted, Alexander McSween and a Seven River cowboy, Bob Beckwith, both died. 3 other Mexican regulators got away in the confusion to the area with the ironclad members yards away. After the Lincoln War was accomplished, little other than to foster distrust and animosity in the area. The surviving regulators, most notably Billy the Kid, continue as a fugitive. Gradually, his fellow gunmen scattered to the various states. Billy rode with Bowder, O'Full, Dave Rudabaugh, and a few other friends with whom he rustled cattle and committed other crimes.
Okay, now regarding the Lincoln County War, was the press telling everyone the truth of what was going on?
No. As they were saying, oh, the Army's now here to help out. But as you heard in history about Lawrence Murphy, he had the Army in his pay. So when the Army came, it was by Lawrence Murphy's thing. When the governor spoke, it was by Lawrence Murphy. Everything was paid by Lawrence Murphy.
Now, who was Pat Garrett, and what role did he have in this?
Well, Pat Garrett was one of Billy's friends, and also rode with him, also fought with him. He was a buffalo hunter. You came to know Billy the Kid, and soon rode with him and joined him.
During the County War or after the County War?
After the County War.
Okay, so now what does Billy do after the County War, and are he and his regulators pursued by Murphy for the next few years?
Yeah, they need a new sheriff who knew Billy the Kid well, and knew where you go and hide out. So they turned Pat Garrett and turned him into a Murphy lawman to hunt down Billy the Kid.
You mean he betrayed his own friend?
Yep.
What, for pay?
Yep.
And how did Billy track? How did Pat Garrett track Billy the Kid down?
Well, it wasn't that hard because they kept going back to the Fort Sumner or Silver City, all the places where he's been, even when he first arrived in New Mexico, because the locals knew him, loved him, and protected him. So went back home. Well, went back to where he was home where his mom brought him, Silver City, or then over to Fort Sumner, and this town folk protected him, and that's where Pat Garrett knew to look for him.
Okay, so where and how did Billy die, or at least how we've been told for more than a century Billy died?
Yeah.
After that, we can talk about how he survived and what's the real story.
Yeah. Let's get here. Ah. So while Billy the Kid was on the run, Governor Wallace placed a new $500 bounty on the fugitive Ed. Almost 3 months after his escape, Garrett responded to rumors that Bonnie was in the vicinity of Fort Sumner. He left Lincoln with 2 deputies on July 14, 1881, to question resident Pete Maxwell, a friend of Bonnie's and a friend of Pat Garrett's. Maxwell's son of a land baron, Lucien Maxwell, spoke with Garrett the same day for several hours. Around midnight, the pair sat in Maxwell's darkened bedroom when supposedly Bonnie unexpectedly entered. And there we get to this. Siouxland Dreckert. Now, I'm going to get into a little more history here, folks. When the Deputy United States Marshal, that was Pat Garrett at the time, when he shot Billy in a dark room. And they thought they heard Billy the Kid talking, but all they heard was whispers. And here's what's wrote. When the Deputy United States Marshal, that was Pat Garrett at the time, rolled the body over, he looked up at Pat Garrett. It's recorded in the Marshal's office in New Mexico that he told Pat Garrett, "You killed the wrong man." Land tells wide open country. Land says since Garrett shot in the dark, it is likely that he mistakenly shot another man that night. The man Garrett killed reportedly had a full beard, while Billy only sported a peach fuzz. Unwilling to admit his mistake, Garrett identified the young man as Billy the Kid and buried him. He was going to bury Billy the Kid, and that's what he did, Land said. So they gave who Garrett wanted to be called Billy the Kid a Catholic wake and a Catholic funeral, and made sure it was not properly done, but it had the looks of it being properly done and buried quickly and quietly.
And they dug him a grave.
Yep.
And the word goes out through all America that Billy the Kid was shot. And that's the end of him.
Dead by Pat Garrett.
Now, Billy the Kid had a brother who died, in Arkansas, and left him some land. Many years later, like 70 years later, I know, like in the 50s, right? In the 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 70 years, 70 years later, nearly.
Mm-hmm.
And this probate officer had to find if Billy was still alive so he could inherit this land. And what did he discover?
As for the evidence that Brush Bill Roberts was the kid, it all comes down to a man named William Morrison. He was a probate investigator who had been hired by Joe Hines, one of the kid's former associates. Hines told Morrison that Billy was still alive and living in Texas. Intrigued by the idea that one of history's most notorious criminals had cheated death, Morris traveled to Texas to meet Brushy Bill. Brushy told him he was Billy the Kid and wanted him to help prove it so that he could get the pardon that had been promised to him back in the 1800s by the governor of New Mexico. Lyon says, referring to a pardon Billy claims he was promised by Governor Lew Wallace. Still in need of convincing, Morrison sought further proof that Brushy was telling the truth. The first thing they did was check the wounds and scars in Brushy's body. They matched every known wound that Billy the Kid was to have. Lyon says, I don't know any man that would go out and put 5 bullet scars on his body so that would match up with somebody else. Brushy never received his pardon, as New Mexico officials didn't believe that he was really the kid. And while Billy's story has gained support over the years, many remain skeptical. So,
Did what's the name of this person they believe is Billy the Kid again? Rushy?
Brushy Bill Roberts.
And Mushy Bill Roberts, did he admit to being Billy the Kid?
Yes.
And when did he die and where was he buried?
He died December 27th, 1950, Waco, Texas.
And is that that's where he's buried?
Yep.
And his burial grave, is it marked Billy the Kid?
Yes. See if I can get this on the camera. Let me see this.
A bit closer. We're getting the false. Yeah, closer. You're almost enough. Yeah, it's kind of hard because that false background is blocking it all out. And probably because it has no light. Yeah, there you go. So
right there, Billy the Kid.
Okay, so what do you think the evidence is that he was in fact Billy the Kid? And if he was, how did he escape and what did he do all those years?
Well, I'm impressed actually with Wikipedia. It has a lot more information. The room was too dark for a visual identification. Garrett claimed he knew it was the kid by his voice, even though all present had only heard whispers. Ultimately, both Poe and McKinney agreed with Garrett, but McKinney recanted years later and claimed, like Poe before him, that Garrett had killed someone else. Now, get this, folks. Local residents of Fort Sumner also immediately disputed the death of the kid. Garrett hastily assembled an official inquest by political cronies. Murphy. Everything leads back to Murphy.
And so they certify that it was Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
But how would Billy the Kid have heard of all this and what did he do? I mean, do we have any information about that part of the story? Or does he just disappear from history?
He disappeared from history, folks, and resurfaced. Now,
what other evidence was? Has anyone done like a facial recognition between the guy who claimed to be Kid and the photos we know who are of Billy the Kid?
yes.
And what were the results of that study?
In 1990, a study using photo comparison equipment at a laboratory for vision studies in the Advanced Graphic Laboratory in the University of Texas was conducted by image experts Scott Acton and Alan Bulfick. The study corrected for the facial positioning and used the same face recognition techniques used by the FBI, CIA, and Interpol, which are claimed to provide a significant level of statistical validity. Photographs of Bushy Bill Roberts at the age of 14 seem to resemble the well-matched known Dietrich Upton tintype of Billy the Kid. A photograph of Brushy Bill at the age of 71 was a 93% match. Both Acton and Bovik concluded that this result irrefutably shows and proves that Roberts and the Kid are the very close match.
When you said photos of Roberts at 14, do you mean in 1914 or at the age of 14?
At the age of 14.
Okay, so Roberts was still carrying around a picture of himself when he was 14.
Mm-hmm.
That's unusual. Most men don't carry around a picture of themselves when they're 14. That would have been the year his ma died.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
But also, it was given seal of approval by a judge in Arkansas.
so a judge actually heard the evidence, and what, the
Mhm.
judge in the Probert case?
In 1996, the results of the study were presented to Andre McNeil, a chancery judge of the 12th Judicial District, and the prominent Arkansas attorney, Helen Grinder, who stated that based on the study and other evidence, the case for Roberts being Billy Kid was strong, substantial, and excellent.
So what do you think Billy the Kid did all those years? Where did he go?
Well, I think you probably either the townspeople, as is said, denied his death and and didn't believe the tales because they knew of all the corrupt politicians running Arizona territory and New Mexico territory. Either hid him until Pat Garrett was shot dead by a 21-year-old when he got back into Lincoln, not by Billy the Kid, but by another young outlaw, and waited until a new governor was appointed. Or he went down into Mexico and waited till probably 1900s to surface and changed his name and came up to Hicko, Texas. And let me see where Hicko, Texas is.
Hicko, how do you spell that?
Hicco.
Hicko.
It is just outside Fort Worth, Dallas.
Okay. What, north, south, east, or west?
South.
South, Hicko, Texas. Now, did in fact the governor of New Mexico or the president of the United States ever pardon Billy the Kid and the regulators for their part in the Lincoln County War?
No. It was still being discussed, I think. It was even on Fox News one time in the early 2000s where people were still saying, and when they had the governor on from New Mexico, Billy Kid needs to be pardoned, and the governor's like, no, he's a criminal. So it's still corrupt down there. They still buy cronies of Murphy's story of what happened.
Wasn't there even attempts to exhume the grave of Billy the Kid down in Lincoln to determine if the person buried there was him?
Yeah, and then 1900s, they needed a match. They had Robert's grave, so it'd be easy to get his grave dug up. But in Lincoln County, in not Lincoln County, but in Fort Sumner, there was a bad flood in the 1900s. And the headstone was this wood because Pat Garrett just wanted it quick, simple, and nothing flashy. So when the flood came, it took out all the wood headstones and that, and even today, no one can find that grave.
So Billy the Kid, a Catholic outlaw, or a reformed man who changed his way and fought a just war against corruption, against a completely corrupt government. What's your opinion, AJ? What's your assessment of Billy the Kid?
What he did when he was young after his mom died, stealing food and clothing, he needed that, and I don't know, how were the boarding houses back in the day? Were they feeding him? I mean, if they're giving the kid room and board, but forcing him to work for it, I don't think they would
Yeah,
feed him too much.
no, they wouldn't feed him, and young men need to eat a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised at all that they would still be hungry. And he's stealing clothing too. So
Mhm.
getting room and board and food isn't really enough because you also need clothing. So
Yeah,
that might be justifiable.
yeah.
Uh,
Uh, and what his stepfather, if you want to call him that, did to him, saying, "Get out of here," instead of actually helping him, give him his his actual clothing that came with him, and they're not giving him another gun to protect himself with.
mm.
And
I wonder about his wife too, because if the father died and she moved out of New York City, she probably had an estate. Why would he have lived with her for 2, 3 years if she didn't have money?
yeah,
And if that was the case, then once she died, he had a right to his inheritance.
hmm
So the fact that years later, in the 40s and 50s, his brother leaves him land, the brother must have known he was alive
yeah,
and must have also known he was poor.
yeah.
So
But the horse rustling, cattle rustling, those are killing offenses, even in non-corrupt county territories. So those are bad things.
mhm.
But what happened with in Lincoln County with Murphy and how Tunstall got him reformed, got him back to God, and how everything blew up. I say that was a just war
Mhm.
because everything was against him, bought and paid for by Murphy.
Mhm. The if he fled to Mexico after, that would explain why this guy who is believed to have been Billy the Kid afterwards knew his Spanish so well.
Yeah.
I would point out this one thing, that in Catholic morals, if someone did what was right, but according to the corrupt government, he should be tried and punished, and he flees to another nation and goes to confession, the confessor will give him a penance, but the confessor will not oblige him to turn himself in, because you're never obliged to turn yourself into a corrupt government for a false charge. So the fact that he comes back, changes his name, and lives an honorable life from then on makes me think he might have gone to confession down in Mexico and returned
hmm
to his Catholic faith, and then toward the end of his life wanted to return back to his own land.
Yeah. So can we say Billy Kid's in heaven? No, but can we think and hope that he's in purgatory? Yeah.
Well, it's been a while. Yeah, I don't know if any Catholics have been praying for him. Most people don't know he's a Catholic. So
Yeah.
if you want to do a charity, you could have masses said for his soul.
Yeah.
So an unusual story how this young man with really little education risks life and limb for justice's sake, and that is a very noble cause. And all those wounds, to get a fair number of wounds in that fight. I don't think he got all 26 in the Lincoln County War, but nevertheless, The average guy gets shot once, he doesn't want to go back to battle. In modern times, to get 26 and keep going back, you're a pretty tough character. You have a lot of virtue. You have a lot of you have a great virtue of self-mortification and self-control, and you have a lot of courage, because once you feel being shot, you don't forget that. And so a lot of men are overcome by the fear of being shot again, because they know what it's like. But here's a guy, 26, although not all were received in doing honest things.
Yeah.
But it goes to show you that even someone who lived dishonestly can be touched by God's grace, change his heart, and become quite heroic, you know. And I would just point out that he was baptized on the 28th of September, which is one of the patron saints of our order, who was a crusader. Let me get his name here. Who's to say if this saint of the Crusades might have been watching over him his whole life. I was interested when you told me that was the 28th. For those who are members of our order, there's going to be a mass on the 31st for all the members, volunteers, investors, and all the donors in our humanitarian works. I'm going to have a mass every month. So in September, the mass will be on the Feast of the Holy Cross on the 14th. In October, it will be on the Feast of St. Francis, one of the patrons of our order. And generally, we're going to try to have them on the feast days of the saints. And you can find those listed, our patron saints, at ordo-militaris.us. At the bottom of the page is a link for patrons of the order. But the 28th of September is Saint Bonifacius of Foligno, born 1040, died 1125 at the age of like 75, an Italian-born at Osimo. He's a Benedictine monk and abbot. He attended the First Crusade as a military chaplain, and then he returned home and became a monk and an abbot. And so maybe Saint Bonifacius was watching over him. September 28th is his feast day.
Yeah. Let me get into his guns he carried.
Yeah, okay. Since you're an expert on the guns, and I think you'd put some pictures of his guns that he carried on that page.
Yeah.
You want to learn something about the Old West? AJ is rather, he's our local expert on guns. We don't have the technology yet to show you an image of the gun on the screen. So you'll have to go to the page. But AJ, tell us something about the guns that we know that Billy the Kid used, or we think that he may have used.
Yeah. His main pistol is single action 44 caliber Colt. And the Old West, the Colt was called the Equalizer. So
why was it called Equalizer?
Because if you have to go up against a bad guy and he's stronger than you, the Colt's your equalizer.
Okay.
It helps you take him down. So when that crooked blacksmith that abused Billy when he was younger, and he was wrestling with him, he grabbed his Colt, probably this one, where he was called the Equalizer in the story. So, and the people said it was self-defense, but I don't know if Murphy owned any of the lawmen back then before all of this, but I'm sure if he stayed and got a fair trial after that one thing, probably changed his life. Saying, young man, you're free to go. It's self-defense.
Unfortunately, in the corrupt towns of the Wild West, often it was the merchant who was found innocent and the stranger found guilty. What other guns he might have used?
Yeah, his secondary pistol is double action Colt 41 caliber. So double action means you can either pull the hammer and shoot it, or you can just pull the trigger and shoot it. So don't need to cock it. And his third one, you always see him in the movies carrying a little little bitty pistol, easy to whip out, spin around, and do is quick action shooting. That'd be his Colt 38 caliber. It's just a tiny little revolver.
And did he have a favorite rifle?
Yeah. His favorite and most prized weapon is 1873 Winchester and 44 caliber.
It's a beautiful rifle. You showed me a picture of the other day, and I'm surprised the Winchester Gun Company still makes it, a replica.
Mm-hmm.
And you can order one online. I think it was, what, $1,200?
Yeah.
If you want an old-time oak, I think it's black walnut, kind of, maybe with black walnut. So there's been some movies made about Billy the Kid. Can you give us kind of like your review of one? What's this one, Chisholm? I didn't know Chisholm was also about Billy the Kid. I know about the Young Guns 1 and 2.
Yeah. Chisholm was made in, I think, the 70s, late 70s with John Wayne.
John Wayne's a Catholic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of my favorites. I watched the videotape. Okay, all you young bucks out there. When we were growing up, we had VHS tapes for DVD players. And I watched that videotape of Chisholm to where it wouldn't play no more. And I had a giant rocking horse. It was pretty much life size to me. I mean, not like these modern type of rocking horses. I mean, it has stirrups. The horse actually moved when he got up on there.
How old were you then?
5 or 6.
Okay, so you grew up on these. So in the movie Chisholm, John Wayne plays Billy the Kid?
No, he plays John Chisholm.
Okay. And is that pretty faithful to the historical plot the actual history facts?
Yeah. He shows him meeting John Chisholm, working with John Chisholm, and how the Alex McSween and Tunstall and Chisholm got together and decided to take on the corruption of Murphy and start a store/bank, and how they helped the townspeople against Murphy because the prices were so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back then, a suit, folks, was cheap in any other territory or state, but there in Lincoln, New Mexico, $12.
Now, why do you think maybe Wayne called the movie Chisholm and not Billy the Kid?
Because it's mostly focused on the man John Chisholm and his life and how he moved in Mexico and also the struggles he had with Murphy. So
now in the Lincoln County War, did Chisholm get killed?
no,
He survives it?
he survives, and in the movie Chisholm, he and Murphy go head to head in a battle. And in the movie, his ranch hand called Pepper prophetically said right before the war broke out, it'll be just you and Murphy, locked horn and horn. And that was prophetic for one reason, because in the fight between Chisholm and Murphy, literally, they were punching it out, and up on the top part of this one house was a huge thing, a huge set of long horns, and you know how they do it in the military with the baton and just
yeah.
And
now did Chisholm act? Oh,
and so that prophecy came true, and when they fell through the window, Chisholm, John Wayne was alive, but Murphy was gutted through with the horn.
But Murphy doesn't actually die that way in real life. He's shot, right? I think he's shot by a young man.
No, that was Pat
So,
Garrett.
oh, that was Garrett. Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't die that way.
No,
He died from cancer.
he died from cancer. And now then the movie Young Guns 1, Young Guns 2. Okay, so what do you think about those films?
I've only seen Young Guns, the first one, once, and I don't think we actually have the DVD, so it was pretty good and pretty right up there with Chisholm. I mean, the music score was awesome. I mean, whoever they chose to do the music, it went with so good with that. And it was faithful to how the army came in with their guns and cannons and everything we told you. It follows that exactly. All the action. But then in Young Guns 2, again, the same people who did the music score. Beautiful, by the way. Um, just shows you where he goes and how he hides out, and of course, typical westerns. And it was true back then. There were uh, houses of let's see,
Ill
prostitute.
repute.
Yeah, there you go. And it does show that. And I had to fast forward, skip ahead to the next chapter where the young new guy says, banging on the door, saying, "Billy, look out the window." And it shows exactly what all the things leading up after the Lincoln County War and how they're all being hunt down by Murphy's men. So
Now, in Young Guns 1, don't they have Roberts, the man who is thought to have been Billy the Kid, as the narrator in
yeah,
Young Guns 1?
uh, Young Guns too.
Young Guns 2. Not the real man, but they have a character playing him being the
Yeah,
narrator. Hmm. I remember he opens by saying, I have intimate knowledge of these things, but how I do, I can't really let you know. He said something to that effect at the beginning of that film.
mhm.
And okay, so Billy the Kid. And here at
And
Order Militaris, oh, you say?
yeah, and at the end of the movie, you see how high Pat Garrett points his pistol. And Billy the Kid was only still 5'8" and a young man still, and not as tall as probably 6 foot where Pat was aiming.
Mhm. You know,
So
yeah.
it goes through the wall, and you see it hit the stone jar Pinata the people there were using for a celebration. So go ahead.
I was going to say, I just hearing the facts of the case, since Garrett was the friend of Billy the Kid. Do you think how somehow he was glad he didn't shoot Billy the Kid, and that might have been a motivation for covering it up and claiming the innocent dead man was Billy the Kid?
Yeah, I think so.
I was going to say this has been a very fascinating show, absolutely very interesting, and I hope on Auto Militaris Radio TV we do some other shows about great men of the Great Wild West and maybe of American history, give Catholics a Catholic view of what's gone on in the West and some of the famous Catholics of the United States history. I don't think anyone would have thought Billy the Kid was a Catholic.
Yeah, we're going to be doing another one that you heard about through the shows Wider, the movie Tombstone, Doc Holliday.
Was Doc Holliday also Catholic?
He And at the end of his life, he becomes a Catholic.
Oh, really? Okay. Like John Wayne. Mhm. Okay.
So,
So thank you for having me host this program on Billy the Kid, Catholic Outlaw. And I look forward to other shows like this. It'll be very fascinating. Uh,
yeah,
Dive into Catholic history of the United States.
yeah. No, tomorrow's show. It will be graphic in some parts where I have to talk about the movie Mr. Jones, where uh, he's asking this one group of kids. The older sister's taking care of him, so it. I have to tell you about cannibalism and stuff that they suffered in Ukraine tomorrow. So
As we
just
talk
so
about the Holodomor, the planned, intentional Stalinist plan to exterminate the Ukrainian people by starving them to death.
mm,
One of the great crimes against Christians of the 20th century.
yeah, yeah, and those super pro MAGA, pro USA, you're gonna hate us. I don't care. Truth has to be told.
Mm-hmm.
So, just a word of advice for tomorrow when you're watching. Uh, things are going to be a little descriptive because through this tomorrow show is also mixed in with the because that show tells everything about Voldemort and also a writer that you were probably told to read in school and told to read a book called Animal Farm. And
Yes, I've heard about Animal Farm. Yes, that has something to do with our show tomorrow.
the only way a book that could be widely published and widely available about the event. And
Mm.
Mr. Jones knew Mr. Orwell and heard him talk about it, used all that detail, and wrote the book Animal Farm to describe everything.
Oh, really? No, that's fascinating.
And you
That's
remember the
fascinating.
farmer, Mr. Jones?
No, I never read the book Animal Farm because I knew it was about communism, and even as a young man, I was very anti-Marxist. So, but this is fascinating. Don't tell us anymore. You're gonna let it all out bad. You have to come back tomorrow and listen to Ordo Militaris Radio TV, our documentary on the Holodomor, the great suffering of the Ukrainian people who were
Mm-hmm.
targeted for extermination by this atheistic government of the Soviet Union.
Yeah. So if you like what you hear, and as brother mentioned, we don't have the technology to put images on the screen or put was it B-roll footage on into our show like the big companies do, and you want us to help us get whatever equipment that is needed for it, um, support us by going to our website ordo-militaris.net and click any of the show pages and become a monthly subscription member or a one-time member and donate so we can build up these funds to get all this special equipment. And I think our donors so far, we are getting new speakers that we were using old speakers that have finally kicked the bucket. Should be here in a few 2 more days. So, and just keep being generous and please keep donating so we can get all this new equipment, be more professional, better camera, so I'm not all slow when you watch me. And also, there's the Beirut Humanitarian Relief Fund banner in our show page for today. That is linked to the Beirut Humanitarian Relief Fund on ordo-militaris.us. And you just click the banner, it'll take you to the relief fund page and choose your currency, choose how much, and please be generous.
Yes, I want to thank all the members, volunteers, supporters, and donors to the order. Unlike nearly every internet social media apostolate out there, and probably all the ones you watch besides Ordo Militaris Radio TV, Ordo Militaris Catholicus is an apostolate, okay? We're a humanitarian effort. We dedicate everything to defense of persecuted Christians or informing Catholics on how to defend your rights. And neither AJ nor I get a salary. And everything is done for the sake of others. So we ask you to support our work because we do hundreds of hours of work every year, and that's our donation. So we ask that you help us too, because we won't be able to do more works or greater works for our Lord Savior Jesus Christ and his people without your help. And I thank you for all the help you have. And I remind all of you who are members, volunteers, investors, or donors, that on the 31st of August, our feast of Our Lady Mediatrix of All Grace in Belgium, there'll be the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass offered for you and your intentions. Also again on the 14th of September, the Feast of the Holy Cross, and on the 4th of October, we're having a priest say Mass once a month for the whole order. And it's a poor priest who needs the material support too. And that way we'll have the blessing of Christ's most sacred passion and his most precious blood on us, all of us, and our works. And I think so, one of the ways we can thank you all for joining with the order and supporting our apostolate.
Yeah. Yeah. Mondays are a typical terrorism show, but Tuesday we are revisiting our first show we did on how to start a Christian party. And we're going to start going into detail. I don't want to blow it off anything.
Yeah, in the United States and in every country where there's Catholics, we need a Catholic party. We have to stop fooling ourselves and thinking that any other kind of party is going to save us.
So.
And here at Ordo Militaris Radio TV, we're going to make a commitment to constantly talk about founding a Catholic party and encouraging Catholics around the world to do that, because that's the way Christ can save us in our governments, okay? That's why we can get the doctrine of Christ into politics, by us actually doing it, not waiting for others to do it, because they're not doing it.
So, yeah. So that's on Tuesday, September 1st.
Okay, that's a good day. That's the anniversary of the start of First World War, where Hitler attacked Catholic Poland. Well, thank you for letting me host this program, AJ. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Yep. This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.